The desert heat shimmered above the firing range at 29 palms. Waves of dust rose with every step of the Marines lined along the shooting lanes. The clang of steel targets echoed in the distance, a steady rhythm of confidence and youth. Near the far end, a lone woman adjusted a scope on a borrowed rifle. Her movements were deliberate and quiet. She looked out of place among the tan uniforms and loud laughter, mid-30s, calm eyes, sleeves rolled neatly. Not a trace of arrogance. The young Marines traded grins, watching her work in silence that quickly turned into whispers. "That's not how you zero a scope." "Ma'am," one said, half joking, half patronizing. Another added with a smirk, "She's going to shoot the sand, not the target." The sergeant in charge didn't stop them. He just laughed under his breath, assuming she was some civilian contractor with more theory than aim. None of them knew her name. Staff Sergeant Eleanor Cross, or what it once meant on battlefields half a world away. She didn't argue. She only looked up, steady and unreadable. When she finally pulled the trigger, silence fell, and the Marines realized just who they'd been laughing at. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to World Tales TV New so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? The desert wind carried the faint tang of gunpowder as Elena Cross adjusted the tripod beneath the borrowed rifle. Her fingers moved with quiet precision. Each turn of the dial controlled, practiced, almost gentle. She wore no uniform, just khaki cargo pants and a light tactical shirt rolled at the sleeves. No insignia, no patches, nothing to reveal who she once was. To the young Marines around her, she was just a contractor. Another civilian with a clipboard and a laptop, here to test numbers they didn't care about. At 34, she had the stillness of someone who had seen enough chaos to value silence. Her brown hair was tied neatly into a low braid that brushed the back of her collar. The sun burned against the side of her face, but she didn't squint. She'd faced worse heat before. Afghan heat. The kind that made the air shimmer and the ground ache. "Ma'am, careful with that one," a corporal said politely, though the smirk that followed gave him away. "That's not a demo piece. That's real steel." Eleanor just nodded, resting the rifle on the sandbag. "I know," she said softly. Her voice was steady, carrying a tone of respect that made the corporal hesitate. But only for a second. They thought she was a technician, the kind who talked about trajectories and algorithms. The woman who explained bullet drop using formulas instead of field work. She didn't correct them. She'd been working for the Corps as a civilian contractor for nearly 2 years, calibrating new ballistic software used for training snipers. The irony never escaped her. She once was one. Before her discharge, Staff Sergeant Elena Cross had been one of the most trusted long-range marksmen in Task Force Anvil, a joint Army-Marine unit in southern Afghanistan. She and her spotter, Sergeant Marcus Hale, had logged dozens of confirmed hits during missions that never made the news. They'd been ghosts on the ridgelines, unseen, uncelebrated, but always there when the infantry called for eyes. Then came Helmand Province. Her flashbacks always began the same way. The sound of Hale's voice crackling through the comms, the sandstorm rising like smoke, and a convoy trapped in the open. She remembered calculating distance through dust. The target blurred by wind and fear. One shot, one heartbeat. One decision, the shot hit true. The convoy survived. And then the ground erupted. The blast tore through their position, shredding everything but her will to keep breathing. Hale was gone before she could reach him. When the medics pulled her out, the scope was still clutched in her hands. Cracked but intact, she never picked up a rifle again. Not as a soldier. The Corps had offered her a contractor role when she refused to re-enlist after recovery. "Teach others what you know," they said. She accepted. Not out of ambition, but obligation. Someone had to get the numbers right, so the next Hale might live. Now, she spent her days on firing ranges, quietly testing the accuracy of software that predicted bullet paths at long distances. The Marines treated her well enough. Polite but distant, like a math teacher invited to a boxing match. They didn't mean disrespect. They just didn't understand. That morning, as she set up her sensors and checked wind readings, she overheard the same tone she'd heard 100 times before. That subtle doubt in their laughter. "Ma'am, you sure you want to use that old M200? The scope's probably older than me." She looked up briefly, meeting the Marine's grin with a calm that unnerved him. "Older rifles have steadier souls," she said. He blinked, unsure if she was joking. Another Marine whispered, "Bet she's one of those analysts from Quantico. Probably never fired a live round." Elena heard it but didn't react. The old her might have corrected them. The new her just breathed. In truth, she'd been dreading this trip to 29 Palms. Too many memories of sand and mirage. Too much heat that smelled like Helmand. But she'd come because the new system needed real-world verification. High-range wind shear, long sight lines, open desert. She wasn't there to prove a point, just data, just numbers. Still, the way they watched her stirred something buried deep. Not pride, not anger, but the quiet ache of someone erased by time. They didn't know her record. They didn't know her scars. To them, she was the data lady. She straightened, glancing across the lanes where Marines fired in perfect rhythm, the thunder of rifles echoing off the berm. She noticed everything. The misalignment of a stance, the overcorrection of a trigger pull, the momentary hesitation before the breath. She could have fixed each one with a few words, but she stayed silent. She wasn't here to teach. Still, her instincts never slept. Every time a shot cracked, her eyes traced its invisible arc, following it all the way to the target. Her brain calculated wind, drag, drop. She couldn't help it. It was who she was. The sergeant leading the session. Gunnery Sergeant Mason passed behind her with a half smile. "Ma'am, careful not to show these boys up," he joked, not realizing the truth in his words. Elena returned the smile faintly. "Wouldn't dream of it, Gunny," but inside she felt the old rhythm stirring. The math of distance, the poetry of precision. The ghost of hail whispering corrections in the back of her mind. A gust of wind passed across the range, shifting the mirage. She looked through the scope, adjusting the focus slightly. The reticle floated over a far target, a steel plate glinting in the sun. She exhaled. The numbers aligned, then she blinked, pulling away. No, not today. She wasn't here for that. Her job was to record wind data, run calibration software, and sign off the test results. That's all. The Marines could have their laughter. She'd earned her silence. Still, a part of her missed the sound of a confirmed hit. The metallic ping that meant lives saved. The faint satisfaction of knowing your purpose mattered. Not to fame, but to the men who came home alive because of your aim. That part of her was buried deep. Behind the same quiet calm she wore now like armor, she lifted her notebook and checked the readings. The software had a margin error. She needed to retest. As she recalibrated the sensors, she heard one Marine whisper, "Wonder if she even knows how to hold that rifle." Eleanor didn't turn. She smiled faintly, writing down the temperature. Degrees Fahrenheit. Wind 8 knots, southwest cross, just numbers, but behind her eyes another image flickered. The valley in Helmand, the crosswinds shifting, the shot that mattered most, and a promise whispered into dust. "I'll never take another shot unless I have to." She didn't know that before the day ended she'd break that promise. And every Marine on that range would remember her name forever. The shot cracked across the desert and echoed into the hills. Wide of target by a clean 3 inches. Exactly where Elena meant it to go. She made a small note on her tablet, eyes never leaving the scope. It was just calibration, a controlled drift test. Nothing more. Behind her, boots shuffled and laughter began to bubble like heat off asphalt. "Don't worry, ma'am," a Marine called out, his voice half friendly, half taunting. "We'll teach you how to shoot," the words landed softly. But the laughter that followed hit harder. Another joined in. "You can't just point and pray. This isn't church." Elena said nothing. She ejected the casing, logged the data, adjusted windage by a 1/4 mil, and sent another round exactly where she wanted. Wrong again, but consistently so. The same Marine whistled low. "2 for 2, boys." Maybe she's painting the desert. More laughter. A corporal a few lanes down decided to make a show of it. He turned sideways, mimicking her calm stance. Chin lifted. Finger pressed dramatically against an invisible trigger. "Observe, gentlemen," he announced. The rare civilian sniper. Native to office chairs and spreadsheets, the Marines howled. Even Gunnery Sergeant Mason chuckled as he passed behind her, arms folded across his chest. He didn't stop them. On a range like this, everyone got tested somehow. Elena barely blinked. She wrote down another measurement and reset her rifle. A younger private leaned toward the corporal. "She's not going to say anything." "Why would she?" The corporal replied. "She's too busy missing on purpose." The next shot landed slightly left. Her third test. Another line on her data sheet, but the laughter swelled again. Sharper this time. "Pushing closer to mockery than humor. Guess she's scared of noise," someone said. "All that talk about calibrations means she's scared to actually hit something." Elena's voice cut quietly through the chatter. "Just waiting for the wind to decide if it wants to help." The tone wasn't defensive. It was matter-of-fact, even kind. Yet the words carried an edge that made a few heads turn. One of the older sergeants nearby frowned the way someone does when they've heard a familiar dialect. He knew that phrasing. That was sniper talk. But the younger Marines missed the cue. "Oh, the wind's fault," the corporal said, grinning wide. "Didn't realize the breeze took requests." More laughter. Though quieter now, uneasy around the edges. Something about her stillness unsettled them. Elena kept working. Each movement was exact. Cycling the bolt, checking mirage, jotting notes. She didn't fire fast. She didn't hurry, that calm. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. Was the one thing no training manual could teach. Minutes stretched. Her lane became a small island of silence amid the noise. The Marines, losing steam, started whispering, "What's she even doing?" "She hasn't hit the target once." Maybe the systems glitched. Then came the check. Downrange, a signal flag rose. The spotter's report came through the radio, lane 7. "No scoring hits. Papers clean." That brought the laughter roaring back. "Guess that answers it," the corporal shouted. "She's allergic to steel," the others chuckled again. Though not all of them. The older ones had stopped. They were watching too carefully, noticing details the rest ignored. Her trigger discipline, her breathing rhythm, the subtle way she accounted for mirage without touching her weather meter. She wasn't random. She was deliberate. "Hey, Gunny," the corporal called out. "Should we get her a toy gun?" Even Mason smirked. "Let her run it. The desert humbles everyone eventually." Elena lifted her head, eyes cool under the brim of her cap. "You're not wrong, Gunny," she said evenly. "The desert teaches respect. Usually the hard way." The corporal opened his mouth, but the words stuck halfway out. For a heartbeat, he saw something in her gaze. Something older than rank or gender or uniform. She turned back to the scope, ending the moment. The next few shots were silent rituals. Adjust, breathe, fire, record. Her notebook filled with measured calm. Then Mason's voice came through the mic again. "Lane 7, you planning to hit anything today?" Elena keyed her mic. "Negative, Gunny. Tracking lens drift under heat expansion." There was a pause. Then a low chuckle. "Copy that, scientist!" Another wave of laughter rolled behind her. She ignored it. The corporal leaned to his buddy. "Lens drift, huh? That what they call missing now?" "Maybe she's writing a novel," another whispered. The jokes landed softer now. But the sting was there. The private who'd laughed earlier looked down at his boots, unsure. He glanced at her again. At the quiet focus, the faint scar running along her forearm, the way her breathing synced with the rhythm of the flags downrange. He didn't understand what he was seeing, but something told him not to laugh again. Elena paused between shots, feeling the dry wind slide over her skin like memory. Helmand flashed in her mind. The smell of burning sandbags, the ring in her ears after the blast. Hale's hands slipping away, she blinked, and the California sun returned. She exhaled through her nose and whispered to herself, "Stay with the wind." "Ma'am," the corporal called, sensing weakness. "You trying to talk it into helping you?" Elena smiled faintly, still behind the scope. "Sometimes it listens." A few Marines chuckled. The older sergeant nearby crossed his arms, his face unreadable. He'd seen that calm before. In Afghanistan, maybe, or Iraq. Men and women who didn't need to raise their voices because they'd already heard the loudest noises the world could make. "Target check again," the tower called out. "Lane 7 still clean. What's the issue?" Elena responded, soft and professional. "Recording drift pattern. 10 more rounds," the corporal muttered under his breath. "She's wasting ammo." Elena's pencil paused over her notebook. "Not wasted," she said quietly. "Just measured," the corporal blinked. He hadn't realized she'd heard him. "Hey, Mason," said strolling back. "You got enough data yet?" She looked up at him and offered a small, steady nod. "Almost." "Good," he said with a grin. "Maybe we'll get to see a hit before sundown." She returned the smile. Polite, then turned back to her work. The Marines exchanged looks. Some amused, some impatient. One or two now uncomfortable. The laughter that once filled the range had thinned into pockets of silence. When people laugh long enough without a reaction, they start to wonder what they're missing. Elena fired again. The casing bounced against the bench. The corporal shook his head. "Still nothing." "I don't get it. What's she even proving?" One of the older Marines answered quietly. "Maybe she doesn't need to prove anything." But the corporal didn't catch the warning. "If she was any good, she'd show us." Elena didn't rise to it. She finished the string, set the rifle down gently, and began packing her notes. Then the tower's voice echoed again. Louder this time. "Range control to lane 7. All marks cold. Confirm no live rounds before reset." "Confirmed," Elena replied. As she stood, the corporal gave a mock bow. "Appreciate the demonstration, ma'am. Real inspiring." Elena met his grin with quiet composure. "You're welcome," she said. "But you might want to re-zero your own rifle before you start lessons." That made a few Marines snort softly. The corporal's smile faltered. She turned back toward her bench and began checking her scope mounts. The sun was lowering, shadows stretching long across the range. The wind had settled. A steady 7-knot cross, predictable, perfect. She closed her notebook. The calibration was done. The optic was drifting, but her patience had held. Then came the final push. The corporal, stung by her calm, tried to reclaim the crowd. "So what's the excuse now? Going to blame the sand?" Elena looked at him, eyes clear and steady. "No excuses, just physics. Physics doesn't hit targets," he shot back. "No," she said softly. "People do, when they stop talking long enough to listen." For the first time, the laughter didn't come. The desert grew still, the sound of distant ricochets fading. Even Mason glanced at her with a half-smile, like he just remembered something from long ago. Elena sat back down, sliding behind the rifle once more. Not for data, not for show, just to confirm her calibration. She centered the reticle, adjusted 1/2 mil for drift, and squeezed. The metallic ping rolled across the valley. No one said a word. She chambered another round, took a breath, and sent the second shot. Another ping. Perfect alignment. The corporal's jaw tightened. "Lucky shots," Elena didn't reply. She fired a third, another direct hit. The wind carried the sound downrange, clean and crisp. 3 perfect strikes. She lifted her head. "Calm as ever." "Looks like the calibration's complete." Mason approached, rubbing his chin. "Those were good shots," he admitted, though his voice stayed casual. "Beginner's luck." Elena's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. "Luck doesn't group." It was then that the older Marine, the one who'd stopped laughing earlier, leaned forward. His eyes had caught the faint tattoo under her sleeve, the curve of a coiled serpent around a crosshair. He'd seen that emblem once before, long ago, painted on a rifle case from Task Force Anvil, but he said nothing yet. The corporal gave one last shrug. "All right, ma'am. Guess the wind finally decided to help." Elena stood, brushing dust from her hands. "It usually does," she said quietly. "If you've earned its respect." The corporal frowned. Unsure if she was joking again, Mason called for a range reset, his tone lighter now, but edged with curiosity. "All right, Marines, let's give the lady some room. We'll see who's laughing after the long-range run." As the group dispersed, Eleanor remained at her bench, jotting the final line in her notebook. Drift confirmed. Wind stabilized. Patience intact. She closed it, exhaled, and looked toward the horizon. The day wasn't over yet. The laughter had quieted, But the test wasn't done, and deep down, every Marine on that line, whether they admitted it or not, felt the same uneasy truth rising in their chest. Something about her didn't add up. Her silence had weight. Her eyes had memory. And the way she spoke about the wind, it wasn't theory, it was experience. What would you have done if you were there? Would you have spoken up, or stayed silent and watched? 3 days later, an official letter arrived from the Marine Corps Commandant's office. It confirmed her 3,800-meter shot would enter the record books as the longest training range hit in Marine Corps history. She read it once, folded it, and set it aside. Recognition was never the point. At dawn, she drove to a desert ridge where a simple wooden marker stood half buried in sand. The nameplate read, "Hail M." She knelt and placed a brass casing beside 3 others she'd left over the years. "Still got your wind calls, right?" she whispered. The breeze moved through the sagebrush like a sigh. When she stood, the sun painted the valley gold. She smiled softly at Hale's name, then turned and walked away, leaving only boot prints and 4 shining promises in the dust. Respect isn't loud. It's earned in quiet places. Heroes like Elena Cross carry it in scars and memories. Every shot, every heartbeat in the line of duty is a promise, not to glory, but to the people beside you. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more military and veteran stories. Tell us where you're watching from. And to every veteran who held the line, we salute you.